All right, John. We learn something every
Okay.
Friday here on
Now
Recovery Radio.
okay. We're live on Facebook now. So I'm sorry
Okay.
about if I sound like I'm drunk. It's because I'm missing my upper teeth. But
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk you through that this
yeah,
next hour, man.
maybe.
See if we can put some medication
Yeah,
enlightenment in you. How am I coming through? Am I coming through clear
you're
here?
you're coming through fine. Um,
'Cause I could, okay, okay.
yeah,
So,
we're recording too. So good. How
yeah,
you
so
doing, buddy?
welcome everybody to Recovery Radio, which will soon have undergo renovations. We're gonna we're gonna be adding some things and removing some other things from not the dialogue, but from the moniker,
Hey, I
if
called
I
it
may.
today. I called it Recovery Cafe. Was that
Recovery Cafe
yeah?
with a full menu,
All right.
a full wholeness, wellness, man. And so today I'm celebrating 70 years on this earth, and I feel really, really good. I feel blessed. I feel,
Congratulations.
yeah. Thank you so much for that, Mr. Case, Mr. John Case. I feel really something for you today. I want to recognize that you went under the knife,
I did.
if I
Yes.
may, and you're going to tell us about that later. But
Well,
70
I'm going
years,
to keep
70
it less
years old.
bloody than it,
Yeah, we don't have. I mean, but we can do some. We can stand some gore. It's my birthday, so we can add. We can
yeah,
add that
get
to the menu.
Rendell
Yeah.
in here.
Yes. Allow. That's going to be one of my speakers tonight. One of my guests is visiting the Recovery Cafe today, uh,
Okay.
formerly known as Recovery Radio. Rendell Sewell. Yeah. So happy birthday. I'm gonna have to get you guys together at sometime during this hour, John, to sing happy birthday to me. You think you can
Oh,
handle that little piece?
absolutely. Well, we got about what
Mm-hmm.
8 minutes until
Till we get live, till we go live. We
yeah.
already live on Facebook though,
We're
right?
live on Facebook, but we'll let people know that the official show is going to start at 6:30, and
Oh, was that the bell? Was that the bell sounding, or someone is trying to join
that was
us?
Facebook telling me that someone is following us.
Oh,
And
okay.
somehow
Well, I hope they
I
follow us right into the Recovery Cafe
I know, but they
tonight.
for some reason I got a ding on that. I don't get that many dings, but because I get a lot of
Mm-hmm.
Facebook traffic. And oh, here's Ricky Brown. Okay, there you
Okay, Ricky is going to share his story with us tonight. I think he's from the Recovery Coast. Hey, Ricky, how are you this evening, man? You're doing swell. Listen, believe, empower, advocate. Ricky, can you hear us there?
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
now.
I,
I turned my
I,
speaker on.
okay. Yeah. So we got Rendell Sewell and we got Ricky from Grace,
go. Right.
my alma mater, and so we're gonna have a really good conversation. But I want to open with just to recognize some things, and then we're gonna share a lot of information. Hopefully, we get to it during this next hour. But I want
By the way,
to read
so
something. Yeah. Go ahead, John.
Garrett Moran is going to call in at 6:30, and he.
6:30.
I
Yeah.
just want to let you guys know that he, former, I believe, head of the Department of West Virginia Mental Health
Mm-hmm.
Services, and he left that job to become an expert in social surveys, mainly through contracting with the government to do official surveys.
Mm-hmm.
Then he came back to implement a grant
Mm-hmm.
that he had received, partly in collaboration with Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Al, I believe, who you're familiar with, of course.
Oh, okay. I'm familiar, Dr. Alves.
And so he was given in charge of an experimental program to test out medically assisted treatments for addiction, and to make recommendations to the
Okay.
legislative committee. I think he'll talk about the details of that. But he's a pretty expert guy, and he's retired now. I think he's planning on trying to get a boat They can
Oh.
sail off the coast here, go to Florida or something. But anyway, I know him well. He's a great guy. So expect him to come in, and I think he'll provide some information to you about what's going on in the state around this question. That's firsthand, and much of which has not yet been published. Okay, so I think that would be
A lot of good stuff. A lot of good stuff going on. That's why we want to activate some things and get some things going. So, welcome to Recovery Cafe, Ricky. You're our first guest, our first family member to come into the Recovery Cafe because we're launching a dual. Actually, hopefully, it'll be transitioned into a triple. I'm not going to say threat because we don't want to be threatening, but the triple. We're gonna give you the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. How about that one? Well, anyway, so go ahead, Ricky. Tell us all about grace and as much as you can, and it's when the other gentleman comes on, we maybe transition. And Ricky, I want to let you know that you can just talk as much as you want to. If you leave out some things, you're welcome to come back and fill in the blanks. There's one beautiful thing about this. We can do it over and over and over and over. And the only person that it'll cost is John. And he's willing to do it. But anyway, so go ahead, Ricky. Welcome, man.
Well,
Just
thank you so
take it
much
away.
for inviting me here. I'm very honored to be asked to be here. But I'm a volunteer with GRACE, which is Greater Recovery and Community Empowerment. I'm a recovery coach professional with them. I started with a basic class last June, I believe, and then took the advanced class for the recovery coach professional in July. And now I'm a facilitator for them, which I started that last August. GRACE is based out of Martinsburg, and it's actually founded by Marty Steiner and John. Wow, his name just left.
John Unger.
John Unger. Yeah, that's embarrassing. Yep, John.
That's all right.
But John and Marty got GRACE started there a couple of years ago, and it's just grown to the point to where I think we have close to 2,000 volunteers of both recovery coaches and recovery coach professionals, not just throughout the state of West Virginia, but as well as we're starting to spread across the country. We've got some people in Texas and Iowa and New York and Maryland, and it's growing pretty rapidly. And I just, the thing that I believe the most and that I like the most about it is the community, because that's what recovery coaching is really all about. It's just bringing the community together and empowering one another. As you can see, listen, believe, empower, advocate. That's that's kind of our elevator speech. But that's exactly what we do for the people that we walk with. And that's what we do. We walk with them. We don't drag them along. We don't hurry them up. We just we go at their pace, and we just our goal is by the end that they no longer really need us. That they can function on their own and be able to develop these goals within their lives and achieve these goals and become the person that they want to become.
James, can I
Yes,
can
sir.
we introduce welcome Garrett? I think he's now.
Yeah. Welcome aboard, Mr. Garrett. We're gonna bring you right on and give Ricky a chance to gather himself, because Ricky, I got a lot of questions for you, and those that are listening on Facebook Live, if you got some questions for Ricky about how you can get involved with GRACE, and he's not going anywhere. We'll soon give him a chance to take a breather for a minute, and we're going to bring on some very important, more important information from this next speaker, Mr. Garrett Moran. Come on. Garrett,
Hi,
go
Garrett.
ahead,
How you
Mr.
doing?
Garrett. You're muted.
Are you still muted? Yeah, he's still.
There we go. Hey, Garrett.
Hi.
Hi, Garrett.
Welcome to Recovery Cafe, James. we have a couple of other guests here. Ricky Brown, I believe,
Ricky Brown is here.
and he's active in Grace. He was just
Mhm.
introducing that topic, a fairly important one, um, initiated by a program with what was this Senator Unger and who else was it, Ricky?
Marty Steiner and John Unger.
Marty Steiner, and
Mhm.
they've trying to get recovery coaches and take some direct
Right.
action with respect to addiction. So
Mm-hmm.
Garrett has been involved kind of at the state level through, I believe, some grants in a very important program related to medically assisted treatments,
Medically assisted treatment. Yeah.
um,
Mhm.
of which we're familiar on this program because of both your own experience and Dr. Aldis has participated
Mhm.
a number of times. So, with
Yes.
that introduction, James.
Okay. Well, I'll jump in and give you a little bit of background, and I do know I've talked with Senator Unger about Grace, and I'm very impressed with the work you all have done. It's great to see. So my background, I'm an old guy. I'm not quite as old as John, but I started working in behavioral health care in West Virginia in 1972. So um, just about a half century. That's not all been in West Virginia, but I was mental health commissioner, behavioral health commissioner in West Virginia back in the Gaston Caperton administration 25 years ago. Um, yeah, John, you wanted to say something?
No, no, you go ahead on
Okay, all
Garrett.
right.
Yeah.
Uh, um, John just looked like he was poised to speak there, and I didn't
Yeah,
want
he's
to.
on the beach. Can't you tell he's
Yes,
just see the winds
yeah,
blowing and everything.
right, right.
No, I
Yeah.
was just
So
listening carefully, Garrett. Go ahead.
So anyway, I go way back in West Virginia, but then did a lot of work. Actually, spent the bulk of my career in a research company, and did a lot of work with SAMHSA and the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration and the Health Research and Services Administration and the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality and the Center for Medicare and Medicaid, all these federal health agencies, many projects for them, and I led the staff support team for the President's New Freedom Commission on Mental Health. Getting a lot of background noise from somewhere.
Do we have a radio on?
how's that?
No, still got
No,
it.
oh
There
there,
it goes.
that got it.
I got it.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
So anyway, I was just saying I also led the staff support team for a presidential mental health commission back in the early 2000s. So long history, lots of different projects in this area. I sort of retired from this research company almost 3 years ago, and was I was already living back in West Virginia and commuting into the city, and I reached out to the folks at WVU and said I really think I might be able to be of some help to you guys if you want to hire me. And so they did, and now I'm a professor in the School of Public Health at WVU, and also have the title of Associate Director of Services and Policy Innovation at the Rockefeller Neuroscience Institute at WVU. But my full-time job since I've been there has been to work on addressing the addiction epidemic in the state. We used to say the opioid epidemic, but it's not really just opioids anymore. It's much broader than that. When I talk to people in the provider community, what I hear is that almost everybody they're seeing has polysubstance use and high rates of methamphetamine. We when I first got back to WVU, and I did go to school there. I'm actually a 3-time graduate of WVU and a West Virginia native. I grew up in the major urban center of Burnsville, West Virginia, which in my youth had a population of over 700, but it's not that big anymore. So the major focus early on was to expand medication-assisted treatment, buprenorphine, methadone, Vivitrol, for treatment of opioid use disorder. And we worked hard on getting more people trained in how to provide treatment with buprenorphine. We've actually, since January of 2019, we've increased the number of buprenorphine waiver prescribers. You have to have a federal waiver to be able to treat with buprenorphine. And we've increased the number of people in West Virginia with that waiver by almost 65%. So it's been a lot of progress in increasing the availability of that. We've also worked with the medical schools. I'm part of a team that includes the 3 medical schools at Marshall, WVU, and the osteopathic school, all of whom have been working collaboratively to improve the training, make sure that that everybody in any clinically related field graduating from any of the universities has an orientation to addictive disorders. I've worked with 12 different departments at WVU to improve their curriculum. And, the biggest problem we face really is stigma. It's the bias against people with addictive disorders. That's why the kind of work that Grace and Reverend Unger have been doing is so important. And the worst stigma of all probably is, for the most part, in the provider community. The doctors and others are among the worst when it comes to looking down on people with addictive disorders. It's so huge effort to try to educate and turn that around.
Yeah. That's a really, I like the collaboration piece, because I think Tim, Ricky, I think that gives rise to something. You want to add something to what he said, or you want to kind of put Grace into the laps of Garrett, or have Garrett come into the lap of Grace, because that's what Recovery Radio and Recovery Cafe is all about: collaboration and making connections, because we know that the opposite of addiction is not total abstinence. We know that the opposite of addiction is connections. And so here on Recovery Radio, with all the collaboration that's going on between individuals like yourselves, is something that's really needed, even within the medical, the provider community. The right hand absolutely does not know what the left hand is doing, and it's intentional. And so that's how we got to break through that part of the stigma, I believe. But I'll give you a little bit about my background after that. But Ricky, you want to kind of share a little bit more about how Grace would, because I think go ahead.
Garrett really hit the nail on the head, especially with the stigma. That is something that we talk a lot about throughout class, because the problem with stigma is that it's just, these are things that we have grown up hearing. These are words and labels that we have put on people for years. And unfortunately, it's not something that can just be stopped, but what we teach in our class is that, stigma really starts with ourselves. Just being able to retrain ourselves to use the proper language, and not labeling, putting people in a box, and then even going a step further and taking advantage of any type of educational opportunities just when you're out in the public.
I have a question, Garrett. When the stigma, so the main impact of the stigma is that you're not going to get hired by a private employer. Is that right?
Well, that's one area. The first you got to deal with addressing your addiction, and treatment availability is a huge challenge. West Virginia is has a terrible shortage of behavioral health professionals. We're 48th in the nation, familiar position for West Virginia, sadly, but we don't have enough professionals to go around. They're not trained in the current treatment techniques. And we actually, as I was saying, I think we made a lot of progress in making buprenorphine and the medications more broadly available. And we got a long way to go, but it's much better than it was. But now we've got this problem with methamphetamine, and there are no medications to treat that. So you've got to go with the psychosocial therapies, and the therapies that are most effective. There's one called contingency management that is the best and works very well. And as of a year ago, there was nobody in West Virginia who knew how to do that. We've been working hard. We brought in national trainers, and we're trying to get people up to speed. There are also some very annoying federal regulations that make it more difficult to do that. Federal regulations, many of which are also rooted in stigma and bias. The need for this waiver to prescribe buprenorphine is rooted in stigma and bias. But anyway, it's a challenge to get the people, and then the people with the right training, and then to reach out to our rural communities. We're here in Jefferson County, we're not as bad off as some, but the southern coal fields, it's just really serious shortages of trained professionals to work with people in recovery. And I do want to say that peer recovery coaches, we've increased that number many-fold. We now have hundreds. I forget the exact number, but it's well up in the hundreds, and they are tremendously influential. And James, I know that you've done that work. And in fact, my wife is a nurse practitioner and who provides MAT, and you've worked with her, and she thinks very highly of you.
Okay. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
That's great to hear. So that helps my recovery. That's recovery coaching right there.
Yeah. No,
Trust me,
I told her I was going to be in this call, and she said, "Oh, you're going to love James. He's fantastic." So,
well, tell her I said hi.
Okay, I will.
I have a question for Ricky. Ricky, as a recovery coach, how does Grace feel about the compassionate care, and I guess it's and ethics? What do you guys talk about when it comes to those two subjects?
Well, ethics, we spend a lot of time on ethics, especially in our advanced class for the recovery coach professional. It is a 40-hour class, and half of those hours are devoted to nothing but ethics. Well, ethics, and then the next thing would be professionalism. So when it comes to compassionate care, it's understanding that everyone's recovery typically is not linear. That's something that our students hear a lot, that recovery is not linear. Everyone's path is going to be different. Again, when you get into stigma and bias, you have a lot of people that may favor one particular way of recovery over another. There are some paths that are more popular than other paths. But it really boils down to ourselves as coaches not letting our biases get in the way and allowing that what we call the coachee or recovery, the person that we are walking with, let them make that choice of the path that they want to take. Whether it's something that we think is, may or may not work does not matter, because it is their path to recovery and they own it. And that's another way of us being able to help empower them to make these decisions. And if it doesn't work out, if they choose a path and it doesn't happen to work out, it's not a big deal. We just go back to the drawing board and we find another path. So it's really important to be able to understand ethics, and it's not something that is talked very much about, especially when it comes to addiction and recovery, and being able to empathize with others and not necessarily sympathize with them, because that's another thing about recovery coaching, is that you do not have to have suffered the same addiction or the same ailment or what have you in order to help someone else who has. Now, there are other instances for that. There are peer recovery support specialists. There's also counselors and sponsors, and we promote all of those different paths. I mean, a person that's going through recovery doesn't just have to have a recovery coach, or doesn't just have to have a peer recovery support specialist. Whatever they need, that's what we ask those motivational interviewing questions to help them decide what's going to work in their life. And if it requires a multitude of those, then that's what we will help them pursue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, John, you have a question? One of these gentlemen? Because I love this
Yeah.
exchange. I got. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to return a bit to the jobs question, because I guess I'm interested. Do you have any data, Garrett, for example, or Ricky, on the how you define a success? Someone that goes from addicted or in need of serious help and assistance, or is coming out of prison, or is with the addiction, or in a number of diverse set of situations. But what is a success, and what is the rate of success? I think let's start. If you have any data on that, that'd be interesting to think about whether what you were doing helped, or just pointed the way to help. That's my question.
Well, we do know. I mean, I know what the research has found over the years. There's been a lot of research into these topics. When you look at a medication-assisted treatment program, that one of the key things is it's got to be over a long period of time. I mean, if you are not involved in treatment and recovery supports for at least a year, well, your odds of long-term success go up dramatically if you are involved for a minimum of a year, and 3 years, 5 years, that's all to the good. So you want to think not. In fact, this is one of the worst things about the research and the practice of addiction, is we had the 28-day treatment program. There's no such thing as a 28-day treatment program. It may be the beginning of treatment, but treatment is an extended process. Recovery is lifelong. You don't flip a switch and suddenly stop having an addictive disorder. It's a day in, day out process that goes on as long as you're breathing air. So you got to look at the long term. It is a reality that relapses, returns to use are a natural part of that process. Almost nobody, I always, in fact, I've done presentations to peer recovery support specialists, and I point out that I am an addict in recovery. I didn't use heroin or didn't inject anything. Mine was legal. I was addicted to tobacco. Now you think, oh, that's nothing. You know how many people die from opioids, from overdoses? About 70,000 nationally. How many people die from alcohol? 90,000. How many people die every year from tobacco? 500,000. We lose every single year. We lose as many people to tobacco as we lost in COVID. I mean, every single year. And if you quit smoking, your odds of staying in recovery from heroin or methamphetamine or whatever go up by at least 25%. This is something we don't, we think about the 12-step programs, which at least until a few years ago were coffee, cigarettes, and talk, and the rooms were just completely smoke filled. Well, they might survive the addiction, the other addictions. The addiction to tobacco will kill them if they don't do something about it. And I was addicted for 30 years, and
Mm-hmm.
like Mark Twain, I quit hundreds of times. And it was finally, this is an area where I give credit also to my wife, because it was when I met and fell in love with my wife, and she said, "I'm not living with a smoker," and I
A moment of challenge.
yes. So that was 20 years ago. So but I was addicted, no doubt about it, and it was hard to get rid of it. And I tried and I tried and I relapsed and I relapsed, and finally I found what it took for my personal recovery from smoking, and it was Caroline.
Wow.
But
Good testimony.
yeah,
And all that circuitry, in your body. I want to talk a little bit before we go about some of the science that I've found out since I've been in treatment, and I've been, it's a skill to be, you got to train yourself to stay in recovery. That's why I talk about mine in days.
Yeah.
And every chance I get to snatch me some recovery by listening, I get it in my system, and then I can regurgitate. But Ricky, back to you, and because Grace is just an amazing organization. Now, how amazing would it be if we had all these volunteers, this army of volunteers that Grace, has access to be domain specific when it comes to getting people hired. We have so many different walks of life within the community of Grace that we got educators in there, that's obvious, that could train people for domain specific. And then recovery coaching is kind of a domain general skill that I've come to learn about and that I can pass around. But tell us a little bit about how you guys behave in one of those classrooms, Ricky. How is the class? How does the teaching go? And just take us through a day.
It's really interesting because the classes and it's kind of comical because nobody really realizes it until the end of the week. For the basic class is 4 days, 8 hours a day. And the advanced class for the recovery coach professional is 5 days, 40 hours. And the classes are set up so that they are actually very similar to how the coach interacts with a coachee whenever they're out on their own and they're coaching somebody. That's why I, as a facilitator, and there's about 6 of us right now, I think, and that's why we're called facilitators and not instructors, or not teachers or anything like that, because we facilitate a discussion. We ask a question, and then that ball is kind of passed off to the class. And what I love so much about it, especially now, because before pre-COVID, we were doing this in person. And right now, because of COVID, we're doing everything online. Now, there's always good that can be found in a bad situation. And this has presented itself as one of the good things that came out of it, because now when we hold a class, we are getting students in our classes that are from all over West Virginia, different cultures, outside West Virginia and other states, and everybody has these preconceived notions already, or these opinions, and we freely allow them to discuss anything that is on their mind, and we just kind of sit back and let the class work itself out on who's right, who's wrong. Maybe there is more than just one answer to this, and that's pretty much how it's set up. And we do the same thing when we're coaching somebody. We ask a question and let them elaborate, but it's really just the class. We give them material, we ask some questions, and then we just allow them to interact, and we only need to speak up whenever necessary, because it's really all of them that are doing the discussion. Again, you might have one person that believes this is the way to go, this is the path you need to take because it worked for me. Well, somebody else might say, well, this is the way to go because this worked for me. And then after the conversation goes on for so long, they start realizing, hey, you know what? Everybody is different. And that's exactly why recovery is not linear. There are many different paths. And just because one might be popular and there's a high percentage of people that go that route, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work for this specific person. So that's why we empower the coachees to decide that path on their own, and we don't influence that in any way.
So this question is for Gary. The MAT. How do you find coaching someone who is on MAT as opposed to someone who isn't on MAT? I mean, if they're wait a minute, let me kind of rephrase that question, because this is something that got me interested in medically assisted treatment, because the recidivism and people going into the little skid bids and stuff, and when they got out of jail, they wasn't getting no help, but they were still speeding around, thinking with their own chaotic behavior. But when I came across people that had gotten into the MAT program, I started getting their attention.
Yeah.
Of course I had to, a lot of times down in the Eastern Panhandle, I had to go in and show my battle scars to get access, to even be able to have a conversation with that person. And so that to me is one of the, that's why we come alongside people who haven't experienced that and people who have, because you can call in. I like to consider myself special forces because I'm military. I'm military, but I'm an alumni. I'm an alumni of Grace. So I was one of the first graduates. And so I remember the sticking points for me in recovery. I was like, man, I'm cool now. I'm in recovery, and this is all I got to do is be myself and stay stopped. And so I applaud, and so the collaboration and the joining together is something that is definitely needed, not just for those who are struggling, but mostly to the community who are just unwilling to be informed. And so that's why John and I want you guys here.
What's the question? What's the attitude of either major employers or the United Way? Are any of them approached and asked to help fund or participate in some way?
Yeah, John, you keep taking it to employment, and I'll go there with you. But I want to respond to the other point first, if I can. I am completely on board with there are many paths to recovery, and one of the things I get most frustrated with is people who say, no, there's only one way and it's my way, it's worked for me, that's the only thing that's any good. I mean, that is baloney, and it just, we need to stomp on that whenever we hear it. And I jokingly point out, well, yeah, I found my path to recovery because I met Caroline and fell in love with her. But you can't have Caroline. She's mine. That's
Yeah.
my path to recovery, and you have to find your own. But I do want to say that
Caroline.
that there are differences. I know that the data is, if you're on methadone and you've got a real serious addiction, roughly half of people on methadone will manage to get into sustained recovery. Buprenorphine is close to that. It's maybe 45% will get into sustained recovery, and Vivitrol, the naltrexone, is really good for when it works, but the average number of Vivitrol shots people take is 1. So it works great when you're on it, but people don't stay on it. So the recovery rate is not as good. And medication-free recovery, it's like 10%. So if you're gonna, I think it's fine to say, take your path to recovery. And even if your goal is abstinence, that doesn't mean you want to start off with an abstinence-based approach. And the other reality here is that the many people living with addictions, and many of their family members, and many of their community members, and many of the judges in the courts have such a strong bias against medication-assisted treatment, and a strong push for abstinence-only approaches, that they're condemning a lot of people to unnecessary suffering and potentially death, because while recurrence of use is just a part of the recovery process, any of those times, particularly with what's out on the street and the high amount of the fentanyl and other things mixed in, any recurrence can lead to death. So it is important. Yes, give people, recognize that each person has to find their own path to recovery, but make sure they understand the relative risks. And the risk is much lower with a medication-assisted treatment approach than it is with an abstinence-only approach. Even if your long-term goal is to be completely abstinent, you're probably better off starting with medication-assisted treatment. So I want them making their own choice, but I want them informed about the relative risks and benefits of the different strategies.
Education.
Yeah. So skipping on to John's point on employment, I'm not convinced that our governor always lives up to his last name, but one of the things I think he's done well is in his employment program. And this just started about a year and a half ago, but it has grown dramatically. We've got something like 1,300 people who've been through it now. They are working with major employers all over the state. They have relaxed the laws so that you can get a job even after you have been convicted of a crime. So there has been, over the past year and a half, 2 years, pretty dramatic progress on reducing the barriers to getting employment. That they will support people for getting training, and they'll support them into the jobs. And that program really, it's still early, but it's really off to a very good start. I'm curious what you guys are hearing on the street, but
I actually had not heard of that particular program. Is that just a part of the governor's order, or is that part of the budget and statute somehow? Or
well, I think it was in his State of the State address a couple of years ago, and but they've also passed legislation to reduce the barriers to employment for people with criminal histories. They are working with they have staff full-time working with people in recovery to get them into jobs. They got staff working full-time with major companies to get them to relax their barriers to employment. So they are doing the right things in this area, and it's early on, but it's off to a very good start.
Ricky, are
It's
you
good to
aware
hear.
of this kind of? Are you involved at all with the governor's program? Is that impacting Grace at all?
Well, one of Governor Justice's programs, I believe, is Jobs and Hope,
Yes.
which is where a lot of the people that we have in class actually come through Jobs and Hope to take the class. Now, what's interesting is by the end of the week, again, it's amazing to watch. One of the most beautiful things you can do is when you're walking with a coachee, watch them gradually change from who they are right then into who they want to become. That's beautiful. But the same can be said for every person that comes through this class, because you can watch them on Monday, and then by Thursday or Friday, you can see a completely different attitude and a change within them. And I don't know the figures exactly, but just after facilitating so many classes, it seems like I would say close to maybe 3/4 of them are pursuing a career in some type of coaching, whether it's recovery coaching, recovery coach professional, PRSS, somewhere in there. And now, since recovery coaching is fairly new, it's just a couple years old, I believe, a few years old. The jobs available are really expanding. I mean, they're blowing up across at least West Virginia anyhow, and we see a lot of people coming back asking for documentation on their volunteer hours, the college credits that they receive in order to give to an employer so they can get hired as a recovery coach. But that is just really expanding through West Virginia. A lot of them that come through our class are finding jobs that way as well.
Very good. Very good news. Very good news. So Grace is a great resource. That is such a resource. And here on Recovery Radio, my headphones sound a little funny here, John. Yeah, on Recovery Radio, and
Good.
we're trying to be a resource, a very important resource, because I find that usually after rehab, then what? After work, then what? There has to be a then what constantly. And so when you start to let up on those things, I mean, it actually, for people going into recovery, you don't have to monitor them, because the usage or the relapsing or the depression will be such an indicator to you, because you become really sensitive to people's issues when you constantly, repeatedly, over and over help somebody. There's chemicals that are released, in both parties, the
Yeah.
give and the take. And so
Yeah.
for me, recovery coaching is not always about giving something. It's about receiving something from the coachee, what you said. So I agree wholeheartedly. And I think that Mr. Case here has such a brilliant idea for the Eastern Panhandle and some of the big corporations down there, and to how we can get in. So I'm just really excited about that.
I think that if the governor has a program, which is great news, and it's working wherever it's working, then it's a easy thing to leverage. Okay, with
Yeah.
the corporations in the region, say, look, get involved. Okay, and tell us what Blue Ridge Community or senior in high school or middle school or whatever it needs to do to give you qualified candidates, because there's quite a few employers that are paying over $15 an hour. That's a living wage in this state. And you could have some, if you had enough success stories of people coming through these different services, hanging on, and people, I mean, I can't see why any of the corporations, regardless, wouldn't like the reputation of having the success. I mean, why would they not? I mean, except for a few that we know, but normally they won't. So I think if we could leverage this information and maybe maybe Senator Under
Mm-hmm.
can help us, define the best approach, because I think the
Mm-hmm.
Labor Council would be interested in it too. Um, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
program that, yeah, I think it's a program that a lot of different parties could get involved in. I mean, there's a big interest. For example, you take the Procter and Gamble, the Amazon warehouse down there in Clearbrook, or the Rockwell plant, or APUS. I mean, they're all paying living wages, or going to plan. And the African American community, I know, Reverend Lyles especially, he's very interested in that. If you can find somebody to say, hey, it's your turn to play your part,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that he gets, that's a success in his book too. Okay.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's kind of a politician of sorts, but he does the right thing a lot of the time too. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I believe this is all important, especially some of the things coming up. John and I have talked about with meeting with the community stakeholders, such as
Hmm.
yourselves. I
Hmm.
would say, and so there are pieces that are being overlooked, and they come in the back door, like the HIV and the AIDS
Hmm.
piece and the education around that. There has to be a combination. And when we deliver information, when we deliver services, I'm learning that we have to be aware of lots and lots of things, and some things that come along we're not even aware of, like COVID. Now, how do recovery coaches teach? And this is one for you, Ricky. And in spite of uh, us saying that addiction to substance is a disease of isolation, and then they tell you not to isolate, and then COVID comes along.
Yeah.
How did the recovery community, recovery coaching, respond to that, Ricky, over the year?
It's been really interesting because we aren't the resource, we are connectors to resources. And had it not been for a lot of other entities stepping up and taking what they do in house and putting it online, whether it's Celebrate Recovery or 12-step programs, or any of those different things, people that uh, haven't been able to go to church, and there's a lot of churches that didn't used to present online that are doing that now as well.
Hmm.
And because everyone has been stepping up and doing what they need to do to help to reach folks who are in isolation, that's helped out our stance with COVID as well, and being able to help these coachees, these people that we are walking with, still remain connected, even if it means that they're still sitting in their living room. They can still meet with a group, or meet with meet with their meetings, and of course, everything that we are doing is online, even not just our classes, but our coaching as well. So, I can have a weekly meeting with somebody that's isolated in Ohio,
Hmm.
and be able to talk with them, and that's a huge part of recovery, is having those healthy relationships. Well, how do you have those healthy relationships whenever you're stuck in the house for so long? So,
And then that for
yeah.
me is a piece of a great segue into the Recovery Cafe, because you can get a recovery that needs to go out and have a cup of coffee, and you bring
Mhm.
them to Friday Night Live. But it takes funding, because when you bring a person to the Recovery Cafe, it needs to look like a cafe, so that you can create something that, and when you get that menu in front of that person, like whether it be mindfulness, or just having some smooth music to listen to, or you talk to their imaginations about what they aspire to. And so to me, to be able to create that ambiance on a Friday evening when most people are remembering Fridays as a trigger,
Yeah.
Friday, payday, and so this right here to me is something that I believe any community would be able to take in the process of having a recovery cafe, or a place where you can go and share your concerns and put it in what I call a cup, because this particular broadcast will go in a cup, Ricky, and whenever you want to have a listening party for your family, you can pull it out of the cup and put it on your TV screen or whatever and listen to it and say, this is what I did in 1929, whatever, or well, I'm going back too far. That's way. We don't go forward, Ricky. By the time the kids look at this, or your grandkids or whatever, you'll have it in a cup. What is it going to be like, 2045 or something? But we need this information to be available so that we can have this training tools. I'm turning 70 years old today, and I have been. Well, I did turn 70 years old. Let me back up and say that, because I'm 70 today, my birthday. But I have been cooperating with chaos for a lot of years. But, these last few years have been just amazing, especially when I came into the family in grace and started my career as a recovery coach, a peer recovery coach, which I didn't even know I was until Caroline explained it to me. In such really, really flowery terms, and that is the approach that I take with any recovery. And so I really appreciate you guys coming on, and I hope that we can develop something really great, because the summer is coming up, and I don't think anybody's going to be able to get around 100% anymore. But our clients, our friends who are on MAT and other things and have to make these doctor's appointments and have a ear or shoulder to lean on, we have to be innovative and develop, because I still got some people that's sleeping outside. Been doing it, and I saw so much homelessness in the Eastern Panhandle. It just breaks my heart. But like the backdrop says, listen, believe, empower, and advocate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I did want to mention, you ask about things to help people through COVID. One thing that we have done, and I was very pleased that I played some role in getting this started. We acquired, there's a phone-based app called Chess Health Connections.
I got it.
That we actually purchased at WVU, and actually we're just renegotiating the contract right now. But it provides, you can get cognitive behavioral therapy, you can do connections, and it has a social community, sort of like a Facebook for people in recovery. And it's monitored by peer recovery support specialists, and but we just hear wonderful things from the people who use it about that giving them support and connections to others when COVID made it difficult to get out and see others. But that's something I really think we ought to talk up. It's we just been rolled out this past year, and it's not nearly as widely used as it needs to be.
As it needs to be. I agree 100%. I was introduced to it last year, right when COVID hit.
Yeah.
I think no, Dr. Machunas actually introduced me to that chess, and then I went through the orientation and the class and everything, and I mean it's just an amazing thing. You can pull it right up. It comes up and you can use it just like you do the COVID tracking system that comes up on your smartphone. So I'm happy. But and the education piece and how we collaborate different communities about how people are behaving and what's available to them is just so important.
Right.
But yeah, Ricky, I'm just, you guys' work are just really cut out for you in West Virginia. Your work is cut out for you, but there's some good people down there that's been in recovery for a long time, doing some wonderful things. But there's, a whole lot of kinks. And then there's just so many different barriers in some of those small counties, that, and I mean, it's just there's so much pushback on housing and what becomes available to people and what people want to, and the newspaper, the communications down there, they don't support too much about, I mean, it's a lot of stigma. And I mean, and I mostly was in Berkeley County. And so, but it's my birthday, so I'm not going to talk ill of anyone, but I tell you,
Well,
yeah, that's a long road, man. And everybody's against, nobody wants to come alongside one another in a few of those communities. And it's usually the communities with leadership where you think the leadership should be the most impressive, and it's not. But I'm familiar with a lot of the drug court judges now, George McLaughlin and who is it? Judge, what's her name? Jesus.
Oh, the woman?
Yes.
Oh.
No, not the federal judge.
No,
Anyway, so but people are easing up a lot. But there's just still so many barriers that, and then people like the when you get to try to access a lot of programs, and then the transportation piece
Yeah.
makes it really difficult for a lot of people.
but there's been progress there too.
There's been progress. You are
yes.
absolutely right.
It's
So I have to give credit where credit is due. But
Yeah.
grace.
A question about progress. West Virginia is not a rich state, and it's not getting much richer, certainly since the pandemic. Does really addressing this problem going to require a very large amount of federal or outside aid to, regardless of what the politics might change in the state legislature. I don't know exactly how right now. It might, but even so, if they did, there's a lot of competition for sort of stagnant resources, and there's not a whole lot of people to tax. I think Justice is our only billionaire, if I'm not mistaken, and so. Are we going to have a rescue package to really do something? Are we making enough progress right now? What would be enough progress?
Well, these state opioid response grants from SAMHSA have been big and very helpful. I mean, West Virginia, because it's the hardest hit state, the highest death rate, has gotten a lot of money. They're getting 60, 80 million a year in SOAR grant funds. And that's a lot. And it seems likely that what President Biden's going to do is going to increase that even further. A problem has been that from the time the state opioid response grants started was they were just time limited block grants. And that's no good. You need something that's sustainable. You need to know when you're developing a program that you've got a way to fund it on an ongoing basis. And a lot of the work that I've been doing over the past couple of years has been with the state Medicaid program and trying to come up with program models that can be funded through Medicaid. And because we're so poor, the feds cover 80% of every dollar spent on Medicaid in West Virginia. It's only 50% on average nationally, but it's 80% in West Virginia.
Oh man.
So I think we will see a sustained movement. The legislature has been a huge barrier. I mean, just each year you sort of hold your breath, hoping they don't do too much damage. But this year doesn't look good. I mean, it looks like this attack on harm reduction programs is really very frightening. It's just going to kill people left and right. And it's this vengeful. I've met this. I've met the major proponent. Oh, horrible. But but I think the feds are making resources available, John, and I do worry about some of the leadership in our legislature in particular. But and ultimately, it's a James, you said it. It's a disease of connection, and
Mm-hmm.
it is our economy. It's the terrible shape of our economy that has. And you look around the country, the places where this is worse are places where the
Mm-hmm.
jobs have gone away.
Mm-hmm.
Manufacturing in Ohio and mining in West Virginia, and when the jobs go away and people lose. Um, they thought they had a path for their life and that path disappears,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
that's when addiction is likely to happen. And
Mm-hmm.
how we turn that around, how we address the economic problems in this state is really the greatest challenge in my mind.
Yeah, yeah. I want to just say that I think you're absolutely right. I was just talking to John earlier, and I was telling him that when the light bulb finally went off in my head after 30 years of substance abuse,
Mm-hmm.
it was the economics that did it for me. I'm a Vietnam veteran,
Mm-hmm.
and the government paid me this huge sum of money. Um, and I mean, but I had stopped before that. But I knew that this money was coming, and
Mm-hmm.
I gotten some responsibility. I came out of rehab. I got some responsibility, and then I got the economic thing got straightened out in my life, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden, I didn't want heroin anymore,
Mm-hmm.
or any of the chaos that would connect itself to that money.
Mm-hmm.
And here I am, over 9,000 days later, still doing the same thing.
All right. Yeah.
Because I found something to connect myself to, and the something was responsibility. Now, my point with that is the stigma, because I became HIV positive along the way, and so that added more frustration and stigma, and the
Mm-hmm.
secrecy in your families, and you go to the NA meetings, and they say your anonymity, and you got to keep all this stuff secret, and it didn't make any sense because as soon as I come outside, everybody in the neighborhood knew where I was, in this church basement. Anyway, so I'm not gonna go off on a tangent, but I'm just saying that for real, the piece for me, honestly, was the economics.
Mm-hmm.
That's what actually helped, really, really helped me to
Helps
stay
you.
stopped.
Yeah, helps you have meaningful life roles. I mean, that I think
Now,
the economy and meaningful life roles are just fit
right
right
up there with
together. Yeah.
air and water for me. So,
Yeah.
after that, everything just became so much more clear.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in recovery for me, I started making some clear decisions. I said, well,
Mm-hmm.
okay, if I want to be in recovery, but I want to do it, I want a tailor-made recovery. How do I do that? So I finally met me, and then I
Mm-hmm.
started excelling at the things that I liked, the things that gave me that feeling. I found something else to fall in love with, and
Yeah.
in the processes, and so all the science that I learned about that. But that's a whole really another good show that
Mm-hmm.
I would like to get Dr. Aldis on, and
Mm-hmm.
you, and somebody from Grace, and we just open it up to the public about how beautiful, if you release the right chemistry into your system and your behavior, and you do it over and over and over and over again, that repeated experience, and I didn't know that recovery from trauma builds resilience.
Yeah.
So so and so that's the education that recovery coaches and Grace, and how we can get people to where they can have an empowered relationship with stress,
Yeah.
instead of stress taking control and having people immediately awfulize and catastrophize, and they go back into that darkness. And here we go with the recidivism. So my question, or my point is, not to get people in sustained recovery, but how to get the country, how to stop sustaining addiction.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now that's right on point. Um,
So that's the stigma for me. I was so happy one year I was in Rotary, and one of the city council members stood up and announced that he was he was in recovery. And I said, damn, if he can stand up and still be accepted, I should be able to pull up my shirt sleeve and say, look, you know, I was a heroin addict. I'm in your club. I'm the same person.
Mm-hmm.
But there was some other stigma in the room. They accepted the scars, but not so much the skin.
Yeah.
And you know, and I didn't want to fool myself, but I was in there anyway just to see what recovery really looks like and what it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels better to me when I put boots on the ground and go back into the community and try to pull my people out.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We're at 7:30, James.
Okay, so any parting words? Ricky, I would really love both of y'all to come back anytime you feel like it, because there's so much more to Grace that we got to put out there, because it's amazing how many people that has gone through their training thus far and how many people are waiting to get in. And you guys are scooting all over West Virginia, and it's going into the prisons. You know, it's getting ready for people to come out to a recovery-ready community when they get back.
Yes.
Yeah, James, that's it right there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you've got classes, you know, booking through August right now, I believe, and you know, just the way Grace reaches out and looks at the whole picture and says, where could we benefit the most? And next thing you know, we're holding classes, because our classes aren't just for the public. Our classes, you know, we hold them for corrections, we hold them for nurses, EMT, police, and just like you said, those that are incarcerated. I absolutely love the fact that we can meet with somebody who is incarcerated that's getting ready to be paroled or discharged, and be able to walk with them, you know, the last few weeks that they're in there. And then whenever they're discharged, we just continue walking with them and meeting them on a weekly basis, and just helping them become the person that they want to become, and not be stuck where they feel like they've been stuck at for so long. And again, it's a beautiful thing to, it's been one of the best decisions of my life, is becoming a recovery coach, and it makes you very humble. And I learned so much more about myself probably than what the coachees do. I don't know, but it's a growing process for everyone.
And I'll just say, just as a last word, that your phrase "recovery ready communities" is right on point. That's what we need to do, is get our communities working together, collaborating with each other, to be able to support these people and give them those connections that give them meaning in life and help them recover. And
that's that stigma we're trying to break right there. It's not us and them. It's the community working together as a whole,
Right.
you know.
Right.
And that is the only way it'll work.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Any parting words? What we looking at, John? We run out of time here.
It'll be posted on YouTube, and it's already live, and you can and saved actually on Facebook's Reentry Recovery public group. Anybody can go there, and also I'll post it on YouTube and send out notices on all over the place. Okay. So
All over the place. Yeah.
Wonderful contributions. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
All right.
You.
Thanks for coming in, man. See you guys.
Thank you. Take care now.
Vincent Ramos.